Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're doing something really exciting. We are tracing the absolutely chaotic, high-stakes survival journey of literally the most valuable company on Earth right now. When we look at tech titans today, we usually just assume their path to dominance was this smooth, predictable, upward trajectory, right? But the story of NVIDIA? It is entirely different. It's a narrative forged in a series of near-fatal bets, incredible pivots, and honestly, a sheer refusal to die. So, by October 2025, NVIDIA crossed this completely wild milestone, a $5 trillion market valuation. $5 trillion. That is a staggering number, putting them way ahead of established giants like Apple and Google. They are, without a doubt, the undisputed king of the hardware that is powering our modern era. But to truly understand how they pulled this off, we have to rewind the clock and look at a moment when this exact same company was staring directly into the abyss. Because not that long ago, this $5 trillion tech titan had exactly 30 days of payroll left in the bank. Yep, 30 days. They were one single month away from complete annihilation, with their backs entirely against the wall. And that massive contrast is the whole heart of our explainer today. I mean, how do you go from 1 month of cash remaining to ruling the technological world? Well, to answer that, we have to look at the DNA of the company itself, which comes directly from its CEO. Section 1, an unlikely origin story. NVIDIA's resilience wasn't cooked up in some fancy boardroom, it was forged way earlier. CEO Jensen Huang was born in Taiwan, and at age 9, his parents sent him to America for a better education. But he wasn't sent to some prestigious prep school. He was sent to the Oneida Baptist Institute in Kentucky, a place that, quite frankly, looked a lot more like a reform school. He learned discipline, he literally cleaned bathrooms, and he learned not to complain. It wasn't your typical tech billionaire origin story for sure, but it instilled this core, unshakable philosophy in him. When the situation is terrible, you adapt or you disappear. And man, he was going to need that mindset very soon. Fast forward to 1992. Jensen quits his nice, stable job to build a chip for the future of 3D gaming, a market that, by the way, barely even existed at the time. For 2 whole years, they spent every single dollar they had building their first product, the NV1. And they built the NV1 on quadratic mapping for curved surfaces. But then, boom, Microsoft publishes the DirectX specification, which was entirely based on tiny flat triangles. So NVIDIA had just spent 2 years and all their money building a chip with tremendous confidence for a world that suddenly, overnight, no longer existed. Section 2, 30 days from bankruptcy. Okay, so NVIDIA has one single lifeline left, a contract to build a graphics processor for Sega's upcoming Dreamcast console. But there was a massive, glaring problem. Sega's chip used the exact same dead-end quadratic technology as the NV1. Now, what's incredible here is Jensen's reaction. Instead of just taking the money and building a doomed product to survive another year, he flew to Japan. He sat down with Sega's CEO and told him to cancel the contract and find someone else. But then, in this moment of sheer vulnerability, Jensen asked him to invest the remaining $5 million of the contract into NVIDIA anyway, delivering that incredible quote. Against all common business logic, Sega's CEO actually agreed, mostly because he just liked Jensen. That $5 million bought NVIDIA exactly 6 months. They built the Riva 128 from scratch, completely compatible with DirectX triangles, and they launched it with just that 1 month of payroll left. If it failed, they were done. Gone. But game developers actually used it, and gamers actually bought it. Within 4 months, they went from the absolute brink of bankruptcy to 1 million units sold, completely saving the whole shebang. Most CEOs would have taken a very long vacation after surviving that kind of stress. Instead, Jensen walked back into the office, wrote the word "more" on a whiteboard, and set up our next major pivot. Section 3, the $500 million bet. By 1999, NVIDIA drops the GeForce 256 and gives the world a brand new term, the GPU, or Graphics Processing Unit. It was a massive leap forward, taking these really complex 3D calculations right off the main processor. Gamers absolutely loved it because their virtual worlds were suddenly smoother with way better lighting. The gaming business exploded, and NVIDIA became the undisputed king of PC graphics. The obvious, safe move was to just keep making better gaming chips, right? But Jensen, he saw something else. Let's break this down. Think of a standard CPU as one incredibly smart employee doing complex tasks one by one, super fast. But a GPU, that's kind of like having 10,000 interns doing tiny calculations all at once. The interns might not be as smart individually, but there are thousands of them.
And if you have a massive problem that can be broken down into thousands of simultaneous calculations like physics, climate models, or biology, this gaming chip suddenly looks like a remarkably cheap supercomputer.
And this realization led Jensen to ask a question that would honestly change the trajectory of human technology. What if the exact same chip that rendered explosions in your video game could be used to simulate molecules, predict the weather, or eventually train machines to think? So in 2006, Jensen launches CUDA. This was a software platform allowing researchers to use GPUs for general-purpose computing. And he committed $500 million to build it. $500 million. For years, this was basically a massive, extremely expensive science project subsidizing a hobby for PhD students. The gaming business was printing money, while CUDA was printing almost nothing. But Jensen just kept waiting for a problem big enough to prove him right. It took 6 long years of waiting, but that $500 million bet finally found its killer application. Section 4. The AI Awakening. All right, it's 2012. We're at a competition called ImageNet, where AI researchers are trying to get software to identify what's in millions of different images. Now, for a decade, people had been hand-coding features, but a team from the University of Toronto used NVIDIA gaming cards to run a neural network called AlexNet. The second-place team, the University of Tokyo, had a 26.2% error rate. AlexNet came in at 15.3%. In the world of AI research, that isn't just a win, it was literally an absolute murder scene. Suddenly, the whole tech world woke up. AlexNet proved that if you give a neural network enough data and massive computing power, it can learn features itself. And training a neural network requires millions of small calculations happening simultaneously. You know, the 10,000 interns we talked about earlier. This was the exact architecture NVIDIA had been quietly perfecting for 6 years with their $500 million bet. The world's top labs, Stanford, Google, Meta, Microsoft, they all realized they weren't buying graphics cards anymore. They were buying the foundational computing power for artificial intelligence itself. NVIDIA had the hardware, the software, and the scale to deliver it. But surviving market forces is one thing. Being the engine of the AI revolution placed NVIDIA right in the middle of global politics. Section 5. The Geopolitical Chessboard.
Now, before the geopolitical heat really got turned up, NVIDIA tried to fix their biggest weakness. They designed chips, sure, but they didn't own the underlying instruction sets. That core architecture belonged to a British company called ARM. So in 2020, NVIDIA offered $40 billion to buy ARM. But tech competitors and global regulators immediately united against it. The FTC sued, the European Commission investigated, and the UK blocked it on national security grounds. 18 months later, NVIDIA was forced to just walk away.
But the regulatory pressure was just getting started. Washington stepped in, outright banning the export of NVIDIA's super advanced H100 AI chips to China, which instantly cut off massive customers like Alibaba and ByteDance. NVIDIA responded by doing what they do best, adapting. They engineered a weaker chip, the H800, specifically designed to fit perfectly within those new legal rules. But then, by late 2023, Washington tightened the rules again and restricted the H800 too. NVIDIA was no longer just a business, it was a strategic piece on a geopolitical chessboard, forced to navigate these export bans in a very real technological war. Yet, despite navigating this incredibly messy political minefield, they just kept growing. Why? Well, because the demand from tech giants was, and still is, absolutely insatiable. Companies like OpenAI, Anthropic, xAI, and Microsoft were locked in an all-out arms race to build massive large language models. The demand was so extreme that NVIDIA's next-generation Blackwell chips were heavily backordered before the factories could even finish making them. This unprecedented scaling pushed NVIDIA past every single hurdle in their way. And that brings us full circle to this final defining quote from Jensen Huang. This $5 trillion empire wasn't built on some flawless, perfectly executed master plan. It was built on surviving a doomed curved surface chip, begging for a $5 million lifeline, betting $500 million on a science project, and navigating international export bans. Every single bet looked totally insane from the outside, and every single one paid off. It really makes you wonder, as AI continues to fundamentally reshape our entire world, what impossible bet is NVIDIA quietly making today that we won't even understand for another 6 years? Thanks so much for watching this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.